to the TokyoBill Weekly. Stories from Japan, told from Japan. This week, Japan spent 13 years and billions of yen trying to make itself cool. And this week, the government finally admitted it didn't work. There's a phrase you may have heard, cool Japan. It has been part of the official vocabulary of Japanese government policy since the early 2000s, when someone in a ministry noticed that anime, manga, Japanese food, fashion, and design were becoming globally popular and decided that this was something the government should take credit for. More than that, something it should invest in, accelerate, and turn into a formal instrument of national soft power. The result was the Cool Japan Fund, officially known as the Overseas Demand Development Support Organization, established in 2013 under Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The fund received an initial investment of 50 billion yen of public money. Its mission was to promote Japanese cultural products overseas, anime, food, fashion, content, and to make a financial return while doing so. It was, in the language of its founding documents, a public-private partnership designed to unlock the commercial potential of Japan's cultural appeal. This past week, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI, confirmed that it will not request budget funding for the Cool Japan Fund in its fiscal 2027 budget proposal. The fund's cumulative losses have reached 54 billion yen, roughly $340 million US. The ministry has established an expert panel to decide whether to dissolve it entirely or merge it with other institutions. A decision is expected by the end of the year. One government insider, quoted anonymously by Japanese media, was direct. Abolition is unavoidable. The Asahi Shimbun, one of Japan's most respected newspapers, called the fund a symbol of the failure of state-led content support. That is a fairly measured description of what is, on closer examination, a genuinely remarkable story. Let's look at what the fund actually did with the money. Early investments included 1 billion yen in Anime Consortium Japan, a distributor set up to sell Japanese anime overseas. It failed, outcompeted by Netflix and other streaming platforms that had no particular interest in whether the content they distributed was Japanese or not. The fund invested 4.4 billion yen in Waku Waku Japan, a satellite television channel broadcasting Japanese content across Asia. It also failed, for similar reasons. Why subscribe to a Japan-specific satellite channel when Netflix and YouTube offer more content more cheaply? The losses on video content investments alone reached around 6 billion yen. There was a Japanese food court on Singapore's Orchard Road. There was a Japanese department store called the Japan Store, opened with Isetan in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, designed to showcase the best of Japanese retail culture to Southeast Asian consumers. It closed after a few years. There was a matcha cafe chain. There was a fashion brand. There were investments in an e-commerce platform for Japanese pop culture merchandise, and in a company supplying Japanese restaurant ingredients in Taiwan and China. And then, as the losses mounted and the fund was ordered to diversify or die, there were used cars and small business financing in Southeast Asia. By the end, the Cool Japan Fund had quietly abandoned the premise that it made a Cool Japan Fund at all, and was simply looking for investments that might, eventually, return something. A senior government official, quoted in a 2022 report on the fund's difficulties, said something that deserves to be remembered. "Who talks about Cool Japan now? Korean culture took it over. I heard we were even struggling to sell Japanese anime overseas." That last sentence is particularly striking because it simply is not true, and the gap between what that official believed and what was actually happening in the anime industry is the heart of the story. The global anime market was valued at approximately $12.5 billion in 2023 and is projected to keep growing. Demon Slayer, One Piece, Attack on Titan. these are not struggling properties. They are global franchises generating billions in merchandise, streaming rights, theatrical releases, and licensing revenue. Sony acquired Crunchyroll, the world's largest anime streaming platform, for over $1 billion in 2021. A private sector transaction that reflected the commercial reality of anime as one of Japan's most valuable cultural exports. None of that had much to do with the Cool Japan Fund. The anime industry grew, and continues to grow, through the work of studios, creators, distributors, and platform companies operating on commercial logic. When it needed capital, it found it, from private investors, from major entertainment conglomerates, from the market. The government fund that was supposed to help it had invested $1 billion in a distributor that Netflix made obsolete. This is not unique to Japan. Governments attempting to commercially leverage their country's cultural output have a patchy record globally. The UK has had mixed results with its creative industry support programs. South Korea's government investment in the Korean Wave, Hallyu, is frequently cited as a success story, and it is true that state support for Korean drama, music, and film production played a meaningful role in building export infrastructure. But the comparison that the unnamed official reached for, Korean culture took it over, misreads what happened. K-pop and K-drama succeeded because they made things people genuinely wanted to watch and listen to, at a moment when digital distribution removed the geographic barriers that had previously limited their reach. Government support provided scaffolding. The cultural product itself did the work. Japan's cultural output has never lacked demand. The problem the Cool Japan Fund was invented to solve, how do we get Japanese culture in front of overseas audiences, had already been substantially solved by the internet, by YouTube, by Netflix licensing Japanese content, by the global otaku community building its own distribution networks online, long before any government panel convened to discuss the opportunity. What the fund consistently struggled to answer was a more fundamental question. If the market is already doing this, what exactly are we adding? The investments in anime distributors and satellite channels were solutions to a problem that commercial platforms were solving faster and more effectively. The investments in food courts and department stores reflected a theory that Japanese retail culture was an untapped export that consumers in Kuala Lumpur and Singapore declined to validate. There is a version of the Cool Japan story that is straightforwardly a tale of bureaucratic waste. Public money invested in projects that failed, managed by officials who didn't understand the industries that they were funding. In pursuit of outcomes the market was already delivering without them. That version is substantially true, and the 54 billion yen in losses is real money that came from real public resources. But there is another version that is more interesting and more Japanese. The Cool Japan Fund was an attempt to do institutionally what Japan's creative industries had already done organically. To make something distinctive, particular, and unmistakably Japanese. To find an audience for it in the world. The studios that make the anime, the chefs who built the food culture, the designers who shaped the aesthetic. None of them needed a fund. They needed the freedom to make things that were genuinely theirs, without the distorting pressure of commercial mandates from a ministry. The irony the fund leaves behind is this: Japan is, right now, more culturally influential globally than it has ever been. Its food, its design, its storytelling, its games, its fashion. These things are everywhere, wanted everywhere, paid for everywhere. The government spent 13 years and 54 billion yen trying to help that happen. The market and the creators got there anyway. That's the Tokyo Bill Weekly for August 22nd, 2026. I've been, and remain, Tokyo Bill. Thank you for listening, and take care.